Welcome to day 3 of the 5 days FTP on role of higher education in conserving indigenous technologies for sustainable heritage. So we will start the first session. I would like to invite our first speaker, Professor GSV Suryanarayana Murthy. Professor Murthy is a practicing conservation architect and a professor in JBR College of Architecture, Hyderabad. He is an independent consultant in the field of architecture, conservation, planning, and urban design with an approach of reuse, recycle, restore, appropriate use, and maintain as principles of design, planning, and execution of projects under his proprietary organizations of Kshetra and IHSRDM. He is currently South Zone representative of ICOMOS India. In July 2021, under his leadership, Kakatiya Rudraeshwara Temple, Palampet, Telangana got the recognition of UNESCO World Heritage Site status by Government of Telangana. In December 2022, awarded with Sustainability Initiative of the Year 2022 in Dubai WTC in Big Five Awards for the conservation of Bansila, Bansalalpet stepwell restoration. He will be taking a session on the topic Kakatiya Cultural Landscape and World Heritage Sites of Rudraeshwara Temple. Sir, you may start the session and share your screen.
Thank you very much, Professor Meenu. So do you see it in full screen?
So it is still not in the slide share. Now it is in full screen.
Thank you very much, Professor Meenu. Thank you, Professor Ila Gupta. Today's topic, what I will be presenting, it was part of documentation and the nomination dossier preparation for Kakatiya Rudraeshwara Temple, which is locally known as Ramappa Temple, which has become a World Heritage Site in July 2021. It was inscribed as a World Heritage Site with our effort of about 10 years, convincing UNESCO and the national bodies like Archaeological Survey of India about the whole idea of this site and the significance of this site, the criteria in which this is inscribed. The title of it is Kakatiya Cultural Landscapes. In specific, I will be talking about Rudraeshwara Ramappa Temple. So while I'm presenting on Kakatiya Cultural Landscapes, I will also be talking about various cultural landscape sites which can be termed as Kakatiya landscapes. I will exemplify and I will demonstrate with examples how other sites have these unique features of Kakatiya temple architecture, Kakatiya cultural features, Kakatiya ensembles I will be presenting. As far as UNESCO is concerned, it says combined works of nature and humankind can be termed as cultural landscapes, where there will be the relationship between people and their natural environment is displayed. The people who made these temples these structures is visible on ground. So as per UNESCO, there are three types of landscape, cultural landscape, where the landscape is clearly defined and designed with an intention by human beings. Then there are organically evolved landscapes. There are associative landscapes. This is how UNESCO defines it. But on ground, if you see in Indian condition, there may be slight variation which may not fall into only from architectural and cultural aspect, but they will also fall into anthropological, human associations, which are, that is why we find more landscapes like associative landscapes in India more than the clearly defined designed landscapes. To talk about the geographical region of Kakatiyas, currently the current Telangana state and Andhra Pradesh state. Earlier, total put together, Telangana and Andhra were together as Andhra Pradesh. So the total Andhra Pradesh region earlier was the Kakatiya region. And the Kakatiyas spoke in Telugu language. Both their court language, inscriptions language was in Telugu. So the coastal Andhra Pradesh and Deccan Plateau, partial Deccan Plateau close to Hyderabad, Warangal, and close to Maharashtra, emerged as Kakatiyas, roughly between 9th century onwards, 9th and 10th century onwards to 14th century. With the fall of Kakatiyas, Bahmani Empire and other the territories also got expanded. So Kakatiyas were, as you can see in the third map, Kakatiyas were spread across and along coastal Andhra and middle Indian portion, Telangana and Andhra put together was Kakatiya region. So this used to be the territory of Kakatiyas, where it was on the coastal side, Bay of Bengal, and on the eastern side we have Eastern Gangas and Yadava Kingdom on the western side, and Hoysala Kingdom on the southwestern side. Like this, it was surrounded by the flat land portions and containing major flat land portion towards northern Kakatiya region and southern Kakatiya region with coastal area and hilly terrain. The superimposition of Telangana and Andhra Pradesh, and if you see, this is the region roughly falling into Kakatiya kingdom. And Kakatiyas primarily they were confident rulers, and they believed in dharmic activities, what is called as Sanatana Dharma activities. So as per Sanatana Dharma, king is considered to be or he would become an emperor, or he would be able to rule the world if he donates for a temple, or if he constructs a temple, or if he donates agricultural lands, or if he creates irrigation lands. So because they believed in all these dharmic activities, they promoted architecture, arts, sculpture, and they also concentrated in evolving new temple architecture. So the temple plans evolved a different form and shape, especially in Kakatiyas. You will be able to see this when I'm presenting Ramappa temple. What is the unique shape as different from Nagara and Dravida temples that we see across India? Nagara predominantly in the northern region, Dravida in the southern region, we think. But at the same time, there is a unique typology under Hoysalas and Kakatiyas parallelly. Hoysalas in Karnataka, Kakatiyas in Telangana and Andhra Pradesh. There was a unique temple plan evolution that happened in Kakatiyas. And another important factor by which Kakatiyas have got recognition and even this World Heritage recognition is because of the system of construction technology adopted and the material management in the design of a building. These two have contributed significantly, which is displayed and can be seen in this Ramappa temple. So when we started the work, we did with 3 landscapes with temples, hills, trees, towns and tanks, which were surrounded by. So any Kakatiya cultural landscape contained, if you see, these are 3 predominant sites with which we initially applied for World Heritage status. Because these sites contained a temple, a nearby settlement, and a water body, tank. That is the association of these landscapes. Swayambhu temple at Warangal, 1000 pillar temple at Hanamakonda, Ramappa temple at Palampet. All these sites have temple architecture predominantly visible and nearby water tank. Most likely they were serving as a irrigation tank and irrigation channels connected with that tank, and a settlement, a nearby village. And later, after 15th, 16th century, during Vijayanagara period, they became part of the temple township. That similar concept of having a tank, having a settlement near a temple as a landscape evolved into a complex of temple complexes along with these architecturally evolved features in Rameshwaram, in Madurai, in Srirangam, in Tiruchirappalli, in many other temple towns that we see in Tamil Nadu after Vijayanagara, in Hampi. They got evolved into internal township oriented, tanks oriented temples. Whereas Kakatiyas were just starting, wherever the temples were established, they looked for water, they looked for hills, they looked for habitation. So all these were combined and made into Kakatiya cultural landscapes. Swayambhu temple and Kirti Toranas, if you see, currently this is an archaeological site which is completely plundered and damaged by during invasion of Tughlaqs during 12th, 13th century. Very clearly, you will only find the partial layout of the temple, of the Swayambhu temple, and 4 Kirti Toranas on all 4 directions. What you see as these gateways aligning into the outline of this temple, the dotted line temple that you see as a plan is because of the only partial evidence that is available, and that is the reason we have noted this as a dotted line. And these Toranas forming as an axial thing, and Kakatiya Toranas, if you see, they are completely unique in the entire country. Kakatiya Toranas have a unique character, so with which the initial nomination was sent. So Kakatiya Kirti Toranas, and is the feature. This is the Kakatiya Kirti Torana on all 4 directions, and which was later followed in Vijayanagara as a Gopuram structure, and which was also followed by Qutub Shahis in 16th century. When they later established the city in Hyderabad, the old city of Hyderabad has 4 commands. which was also followed in the later point. So these Kirti Toranas, and this is inside the enclosure of a fortification, which follows a swastika pattern in terms of roads getting formed across the cardinal directions, and these cardinal directions leading to outside the fort in clockwise direction, like a swastika. So the swastika pattern is clearly visible when they made this. And as per town planning principles of India, if you see in Shilpa Sastras of South India, the swastika pattern is adopted to recreate the king's position as a supreme power of the world. So when one king is intended to be to become an emperor of the world, then it is the Mandaleshwara, it is called. He is made to follow certain patterns in his town plan. So the town plan followed this swastika pattern in this when the fortification was made with a moat all around and internal fortification with all cardinal direction roads. This is the hillock, the circular mandala and swastika pattern, as you would see in the layout of roads. This is the satellite imagery of that. And similar to that, as I said, the three complexes were taken up as cultural landscape sites to denote cultural. Similarly, which is 20 kilometers from Warangal Fort, this 1,000-pillar temple, because it has so many pillars in its Kalyana Mandapa, the number of numerous pillars are called as 1,000 pillars, because the number is cannot be immediately ascertained with a naked eye view. It is termed as 1,000-pillar temple. Well, literally there are no 1,000 numbers, but it is termed as 1,000-pillar temple. And this is also, as you would see, 3 temples projected out is the plan. As you will see in the plan, site plan, 3 temple forms projected out. So it is a single temple or double temple or triple temple or 4 temple, quadruple temple, like that. So if it is a single temple, it is called Ekakuta temple. And if it is 2 cells, it is called Dvikuta temple. And if it is 3 temples, Trikuta temple. Kakatiya temples typically contained Trikuta temples. So Trikuta, 3 cells forming as the organization of the temple complex, which is followed in the 1,000-pillar temple, has a water tank nearby and has a settlement around it. So the significant character that we see in Kakatiya cultural landscapes is wherever there is a temple, there is always a presence of water body. There is always a presence of a settlement. That is how these temples were integrated into the human habitation and also irrigation and water tanks. This is the satellite image of this 1,000-pillar temple. So the third site, which was included as part of World Heritage nomination, was Ramappa Temple. The current temple, which has got World Heritage status finally, though we included 3 temple complexes as per the UNESCO guidelines, this is the only temple which is preserved in its authenticity and in its full shape. As you would see, it is on either side you have is Dwarapalas overlooking the temple towards western side. So the temple is facing on the eastern side. You can see partial shikara projecting out above the Garbhagriha behind, near the sky, you can see. This is the aerial plan of Ramappa temple. The single site with the temple complex, along with small other shrines, has become World Heritage Site. As you would see, this is the cultural landscape of Ramappa. The two hill regions, just half a kilometer away from Ramappa temple, as you would see in the backdrop, there is a hillock, and beyond that there is a water body, a Ramappa tank. It is called Ramappa tank, and on the right side you would see the settlement. The settlement is not like the village is not inside the temple complex. It is outside the temple complex, and this is part of the open land close to the hills, arranged with an intention to get that feeling of sacredness nearer to this tank. So there are cultivation land. There are paddy fields. There's this Ramappa lake is available, which is called Cheruvu, Ramappa Cheruvu, and Kakatiyas were known for building many dams. Many dams, and also they were also known for creating lakes, human-made lakes, big size human-made lakes, and most of these dams are built not on rivers, directly wherever the catchment areas are identified. So that means they don't disturb the ecological balance. So the natural lakes, catchment area lakes, and creating one edge by bund has created a certain character of landscape, which can be termed as Kakatiyan landscape. These are the two hills from inside the lake. And as per traditional sciences, if you see, only few scholars have delved into, unlike Percy Brown and even earlier history books, and including Bannister Fletcher, they don't talk about the traditional sciences that were involved in the making of these temples. Only after Indian scholarship and also even foreign scholarship looking into traditional sciences have revealed how temples are constructed, how temple sites are chosen, how temples and where temples are built, and how temples would emerge as cultural landscapes or cultural entities. As per Brihat Samhita, the temples are supposed to be built near groves or near rivers, near mountains and near springs, and a town with pleasure gardens. So that is how they evolved into, by the time it reached to 17th and 18th century, after Vijayanagara and Nayaka period in Tamil Nadu and Karnataka and Andhra Pradesh, they evolved into large townships, from simple temple complex to all cultural aspects becoming part of larger temple complexes. This is from Brihat Samhita and Bhavishya Purana, where the temples are supposed to be built. Coming to this Ramappa temple, it is located over the bund and or near a paddy field, and it is close to the water, and the direction of water flow was considered to look at the orientation of the temple when they constructed. So the temple, lake, village, hillock, and the settlements, the village. So that itself is the pattern and landscape of Kakatiyas. So the Ramappa temple, typically, as I said, this is the Ramappa temple, and you have two hills connected by a bund, preventing water from the catchment leading to the agricultural area, which is channelized by means of an agricultural channel. It is also part of Kakatiya 700-800-year-old channel, earthen channel, and there is a village which continued differently. Of course, with the current trends and patterns only it is available. So this is how the pattern on the Kakatiya landscapes can be seen. So in short, if you see, there is a presence of hillock, there is a temple, there is a village, and there is a lake. The water part and blue part and green part getting created. The building portion and the portions where there is no built portion. That relationship is the character of Kakatiya cultural landscape, which can be seen in Ramappa temple. As you would see, this is the documentation of the entire site with this two hills on either side. The top is the northern side, and Ramappa temple is not to the true north, and it has a slight inclination. And there are irrigation channels passing through the site. This is the Shikara of Ramappa temple. The Trikutalaya of Ramappa temple, architecture of Ramappa temple can be stated standing on a platform with a Pradakshina Pada outside and an enclosure of Garbhagriha with three projections. This is one projection. The Shikara portion has another projection. On the other side has another projection, forming a Trikuta form, but having three entrances and one Garbhagriha portion with a Shikara. And this has been planned with completely Cheluvai sandstone, which is locally available. That sandstone is clearly visible with brackets of granite, that is dolerite stone, the fine variety of granite, that is dolerite stone, in the form of a Madanika dancing figures supporting the roof portion and brackets very clearly on the three sides of the temple, forming the mandapa, a semi-open mandapa facing all the three directions, the Shikara towards the western side forming this, but it also has other technological and construction features constructed as a dry masonry structure, completely dry masonry structure, and with iron dowels in for the joints of the stones. So till up to Shikara bottom portion, the stone masonry was used. After the Garbhagriha roof is reached, it is constructed with a brick which can float on water, which is one of the features and criteria used for getting the World Heritage recognition for this temple. And it has these brackets on, as you would see, the projection canopy all around the temple. That is the, in general terms, it can be called as Chejja, and which is a kapota in temple architectural terms. The kapota is projecting out from the temple, and it is supported by bracket figures, the black dolerite Madanika dancing bracket figures supporting on all the three sides, whereas the balance part is with the stone masonry wall and projections at the center of the Shikara Garbhagriha wall, the projected Deva Kostas, niches for putting idols and sculptures are present at the central portions of the Garbhagriha wall. This is the western side elevation, and this is a cover page of the book which is prepared exclusively during this. And this is inscribed as criteria 1 and 3 as a World Heritage Site. What is criteria 1 and what is criteria 3 for Ramappa temple? As we let us delve into the process by which it has got the recognition. It was prepared under my team leadership with so many people participating in this dossier preparation. Initially, we planned, as I said, the Swayambhu temple, 1000-pillar temple, Hanamakonda, and Ramappa temple at Palampet. Ramappa temple is 70 kilometers from Rudreshwara 1000-pillar temple. and it is 80 kilometers from Swayambhu temple, which is in Warangal fort. So finally, only Rudreshwara temple has got recognition as a World Heritage Site. There were various meetings that held, and this was demonstrated at UNESCO Paris by demonstrating its technological features under criteria 1 and 3. So what is criteria 1 as per UNESCO World Heritage Site? It is representing a masterpiece of human creative genius. So they creatively thought about creating a floating brick which can float on water. Simple thing is, if the density of the brick is less than water, the density of water is 1, and if it is less than water, it can float on water. So any material which is the density less than water will float on water. So it is created with less than, way back in 800 years ago, they used the technology of producing these lightweight bricks to reduce weight on the shikara, complete Garbhagriha portion, wall stone masonry. When it is constructed with complete set of bricks as a shikara tire, it might add load for this area, because the whole structure is built on simple ground. But that ground is stabilized with what you see in the second picture, sandbox foundation. The very technical feature they have used is, for any structure to build today, we dig the soil and we construct, we lay plain cement concrete or plain lime concrete. Then you will do stone masonry or brick masonry inside the foundation, then over which you will build the superstructure. But here for Ramappa temple, they had stabilized the ground by filling it with sand, by enhancing the safe-bearing capacity of the soil, and it is directly built on that sand box foundation. So it was dug by almost more than 8 meters, and it is filled with completely sand, which modified the safe-bearing capacity of the soil, over which once it reached to the ground level after digging and filling it with the sand, they had constructed, and which was discovered while conducting some foundation tests for Ramappa temple and also the nearby structures. The structures were built on a sandbox foundation and floating brick, and their skill of sculpting, as you would see, the luster and the shining that is visible on this dolerite stone, where human face is also visible like a mirror on this dolerite stone. The interior portions of the columns, they clearly reflect the surroundings with light and the presence of life that is present all around. That is very clearly visible. So these material selection, the sculpture and form modification, evolution of temple art, and use of technology made them as creative genius under criteria 1. And the next one is criteria 3. This temple is a surviving example, best surviving example, because most of the Kakatiya temples were demolished and vandalized, and they were plundered during various wars and invasions by North Indian Delhi Sultanates, and also later local chieftains, Brahmanis, and other. So it was all damaged. So we have this completely intact at Ramappa temple, where such type of vandalism did not happen for this temple. Though it has a best, it is termed as a best surviving example of Kakatiya tradition of art and architecture and technology. And it is also illustrating the phase of temple development in science and technology and art of temple building in Deccan India. So it served as a stage. Even in history of architecture, though it is acknowledged as a unique style, none have actually demonstrated this as a phase in temple building and construction in Deccan, India. So that has been emphasized in this UNESCO nomination dossier, and which is standing out as a testimony to demonstrating and elaborate materialization of regional dance customs. So the dance practice of Kuchipudi and Bharatanatyam are very much present in all the sculptures made along as a bracket figures, projecting bracket figures. This black dolerite sculptures of Madanikas, dancing figures. They are representatives of these Puranas and Puranic texts, which are symbols of this dharmic texts visible, and which is present in this temple. This is criteria 3. So under criteria 1 and criteria 3, the temple became a World Heritage Site, demonstrating as a best surviving example for Kakatiya tradition and art and architecture. So this is the sandbox technology foundation, and because it is intact and it is clearly all the features are visible, and including the sandbox technology can be felt like it is built on the simple ground. It is serving as a best surviving example in Kakatiya period. This is the floor plan of Ramappa temple. So it has a Praka wall and Garbhagriha with the 3 directions of entries projecting out, and Kateshwara temple on the northern side, Nandi Mandapa on the eastern side, and on the southern side, Kameshwara temple. And it is also similar to 1000 pillar Kalyana Mandapa. It is sometimes called as temple, it's sometimes called as Mandapa, Kalyana Mandapa. So which is yet to be clearly deciphered by historians and archaeologists. And this is the floor plan of the entire temple complex. This is the exact floor plan of Ramappa temple. So it has a raised pedestal, and over the raised pedestal, this raised pedestal is built on the sandbox foundation, and over which this walls, entire walls with open brackets and entrances on all the 3 sides, and Garbhagriha on the western side is created. This is the floor plan of the temple. And these 2 are elevation sections of the temple. On the top is the key plan. As you would see, some of the features mentioned in under criteria 3 is the kind of sculptures. So all these sculptures are from the Puranic texts, and they represent the stories and from Ramayana, Mahabharata, and also Girija Kalyana, the celebration of marriage between Parvati and Shiva, that is represented in the form of sculptures from Girija Kalyana. The entire panel is sculpted. As you could see, very minute figures and miniature figures have been crafted, and there is a garland of flowers that is made on the temple, in which if we pass through a needle, or if we pass through a thread, it passes through the small gaps present between legs, between garland. How could they do this kind of gaps? The technological advancement they had in 13th century is acknowledged as part of the whole thing. Of course, as part of the structure, there are some defects also, as you would see in this central picture, where the dance position is Perini dance position is visible. Here we have an upliftment of this floor beam due to one earthquake that must have happened during 18th and 19th century. So there was a research undertaken by National Remote Sensing Agency and National Institute of Technology, Warangal, MIT Warangal, to find out the earthquake lineaments in the nearby region, and they found out to be true, and that led to the shifting and lifting of the floor beams. But the factor of safety with which the structure was constructed seems to have been very high, which has created the complete stability. The temple is standing with a lot of stability in the entire structure, despite having certain floor beam defects and few portions of settlement. They have been addressed. So as you would see, be it the form of the column or the sculptures on the column, they all indicate the quality of work with which, of course, there are in 13th century, there are other temples which followed this technology. But during 13th century, Kakatiyas were without any influence. Only the common thread is the Indian Sanatana Dharma thinking, followed by the regional kings of Kakatiyas, which was displayed. So the Ramayana is common for entire India, Mahabharata is common. So the local interpretation had taken shape in sculptural form in this temple. So that is like the Puranic texts demonstration and maintenance and sustenance of that time is also appreciated under criteria 3. So the criteria 1 and criteria 3 formed very unique features for this Ramappa temple. And this is another close-up view of the central mandapa, and dancing figures along the column. This is a Garbhagriha in the ceiling panel once again. The metallic luster that is present on the sculpture. And this is the documentation taken up, the dancing figures, yali figures, bracketing figures. The roof is standing over these columns with a kapota projecting out, and that kapota projecting out is supported by these bracket figures, and these bracket figures standing into another column as a load transferring mechanism that is in turn transferring here directly on to the sandbox foundation. No wall construction inside the foundation. This is the arrangement of roof central mandapa portion, and the jointing between the brackets and the stone beams, column, and the central ceiling slab arrangement, which is constructed in square and with the cornerstone. The cornerstone, it is converted into a diamond shape, that is a diagonal square. The diagonal square is again converted into a circular format. The ceiling slab, which is sculpted. We have seen this here, like this, and the beams on all four sides, and this is converted into central square, and again another square, and a circular panel at the center over the structure. This is the detailing that we see. And these are the bracket figures supporting the kapota and projecting out. See the sculpture and metallic luster that is present in the sculpting of these dancing figures. And how the red sandstone backdrop is used as a background for painting. These dancing figures are projecting out and also coming out because of the red backdrop that is created. The metallic luster that is, so in architectural composition also, they thought about this red background and black sketch and black sculpture coming out. All these compositional principles also have been followed and visible, which were mentioned in the text and which are acknowledged as a creative genius and following of Puranic texts and Sanatana Dharma texts for achieving this criteria 1 and 3 of UNESCO World Heritage status. Yali figures, apart from these dancing figures, on the eastern side we have these Yali figures. And one interesting feature from this is there is this Gaja, that is elephant holding this, becoming part of the column, holding the Yali, and Yali holding the bracket projecting out for the Kapota. This became the complete feature by the time it reached the 17th century, 16th century, 16th and 17th century in Vijayanagara time. So what was used as a simple structural member has become an integrated architectural, a unique architectural member, aesthetic member, integrated, not in like skeletal bits and pieces structural form. Integrated architectural structural form would be visible in Vijayanagara. So this can be stated as a starting phase of that evolving that architectural phase in temple architecture, which is not mentioned in any of the history books, and which was brought out in this dossier also when this dossier was presented to UNESCO as a unique site for Ramappa temple. So there are other sites near Ramappa temple which are in similar on the tank bund of Ramappa lake, which followed a similar pattern of style. So in order to study these landscapes, one has to look at the geographical presence of these water bodies, temples and settlements and villages. That is how when we studied this cultural landscapes, always made a point to look at the surrounding connection of irrigation, agricultural lands, temples and settlements together, forming this definition of Kakatiya cultural landscapes. Another temple which is about 12 kilometers from Ramappa temple is Ghanapur group of temples. As you would see, similar feature, which is plundered. So initially we thought about this as a World Heritage Site, but this we will not be able to present the what could be called as a Kakatiya essential architectural cultural landscape features. They are not present here, but there are remains. So it can be an archaeological site, need not be a World Heritage Site, but it has to be preserved for its status. So this is the condition of this Kotagullu, in other words called as Ghanapur group of temples. These are smaller shrines in the entire complex. And this is the region of temples studied, prominent temples, which is forming the light gray area and dark gray area, indicating that this is where we have many Kakatiya temples, and in the large gray area, we have a few Kakatiya temples in these areas. The dotted lines indicate about 73 temples have been identified with similar features of Kakatiya cultural landscapes as part of the research that has been identified. Inside the Warangal port, how the tank and temple and hillock and settlement forming part of the landscape. There's another temple where the Chaya Someswara temple of Kakatiya's 1000-pillar temple, Hanamakonda, Godishala temple, Pillalamarri temple. All of these temples exemplify this unique Kakatiya cultural landscape, having a tank and settlement along with this temple. Later I said, which has become a norm converted into grand architectural plan during Vijayanagara and Nayaka period, during 15th, 16th, 17th centuries, which is followed from this 12th and 13th century Kakatiya works. Also, Hoysala works in Karnataka. Mallikarjuna temple, Ainavolu, Katakshapur temple, Nidigonda temple, Tirutalayam in Pandapur. All these temples have this three-sided openings. Only you have only this pedestal visible and Shakara partial portion visible. And all these temples are not in complete shape. They are either plundered or collapsed, or only partial features are available. But there do exist this settlement, tank, and this temple evidence visible to be understood as a complete unit of Kakatiya cultural landscape. So with this, I am concluding my presentation. If there are any questions, I will be happy to address them.
Yeah, excellent presentation, Professor Murthy. So I think there are a few comments, questions in the chat box. Others, please post your questions. Meanwhile, Mona Chandra is asking, sir, the three pillars do not seem part of the original structure, is it? So I don't know what site she's referring to. This question, I think, came some time back.
Yeah, I think that is three pillars. Let me see, the three pillars do not seem to be part of the original structure. Outside, maybe it is because of the color you are feeling it, but as far as Ramappa temple is concerned, all the pillars are part of the structure, original structure. Only in other temples we do find additions, changes, collapses in the temples, whereas in Ramappa temple we have most of the temple intact. And the beautiful back dancing girl sculptures have an elongated form like in tribal art. Any connection? There could be possibility, but no such attempts have been made in this. But as far as the dance tradition is concerned, it is, though it is evolved from Bharatanatyam, but the unique form that is represented here in Ramappa temple has a dance treatise was written taking Ramappa temple as a backdrop by one of the local military chieftains who wrote a dance treatise called Nritya Ratnavali. The Nritya Ratnavali is a form of the elaborate description of Bharatanatyam as displayed in Ramappa temple and as followed during 13th century. So there is a connection to the local dance forms, but not about tribal link. But in India, it is quite possible, like in temples in Srisailam in Andhra Pradesh, and which is close to Telangana, which is of 7th, 8th century temple, which has a complete close relationship with tribal art. So there is, as I said, this temple complex has given rise to new temple forms during Vijayanagara. Similarly, tribal forms must have certainly had connection with this temple, though evidently not described by any inscription or history. There could have been possible, possibly. Yeah.
So we have one more question. The cultural landscape is important to be considered for sustainability and resilience of the area. What is your say on educating and spreading awareness in the local people near these sites?
Yes, it is very important, and that is also happening. Unique to this particular area, as this nomination itself is from local awareness, local research, which is brought out to this particular platform of Archaeological Survey of India and UNESCO. That is happening already. And nearer to the site, I think a few more efforts are also required to spread awareness. Yes, I agree with that.
So one more question from Shraddha ma'am. The art forms are seen in a particular time. Is there any system that is working on regenerating these arts and skill set?
Yeah, it is it is possible, but I cannot say arts and skill set completely can be revived, but it is possible with a lot of training and orientation. It is possible. What we are attempting is recreating that floating brick. So we have tied up with Vellore Institute of Technology, with along with Professor Thirumalini and also Slovenian University. We conducted experiment on reproducing this floating brick. Whether we can reproduce. People just say that autoclave cement bricks have they follow less than 1 as the density of the material, which floats on water. But 800 years ago, they had similar technology to autoclave, and they produced bricks which were the density less than water, which could float on water. So that was created, and it is possible, and it should be integrated with architectural education. And there is a plan by government of Telangana and also by the local organization to spread this along architecture colleges. But I agree that it should be integrated with architectural education. The textbooks that we follow for history of architecture, we should extend, because what was history of architecture till 1970s and 80s, what was studied, and after 80s, there is a lot of work, Indian centric research work has happened in temple architecture, traditional sciences, Indic architecture, which is essential to be understood, and which is possible if we integrate that with architectural education, instead of treating them as elective or as some special subject. It should be part of our day-to-day discussion, like design discussions that happen. It need not be just as something special, but it is part of, it should be part of architectural education. I agree with that question. Thank you very much.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
that
Professor
is
Murthy, I would like to just briefly ask you. It's a very wonderful research and very important research you are conducting in this area. So, can you just tell us something about Kshetra, your organization? We're just curious to know.
Yes. Yeah. Myself, I'm practicing as a conservation architect, and I also practice normal architecture because conservation architecture as a practice, you don't get everyday job in conservation. So I want to be on to the ground really. And but when we are handling normal architectural projects, we have this better research is conducted into projects. When some projects require original local level orientation, local significance integrated, or local context integrated. So we try to do such kind of work in Kshetra, and I'm practicing at 3 places in Hyderabad, Delhi, and Vijayawada. Have branches, and we are currently doing one work at Panipat, battlefield of Mughals, where a museum is built for Archaeological Survey of India, part of a competition project, and we are working on that. And apart from that, some architectural projects and many about 4 or 5 conservation projects in Hyderabad and Andhra Pradesh.
Wonderful. That's all. Yeah. Anybody who wants to ask anything, you can put your question in the chat box, or you may just unmute yourself and ask if there is anything. Otherwise, the question link is there in the chat box. You can just attempt the quiz. Yeah, Meera.
Yes, ma'am. So thanks a lot for the wonderful presentation, sir. That was a very detailed presentation. So our next speaker has joined the room. So shall we move on, ma'am?
Yes, please.
Thank you so much, sir.
Professor Murthy. Yeah. Yeah, next speaker has joined. Professor Nisar, are you there? Yeah, Dr. Nisar. How are you?
I'm good, ma'am. How are you?
All good, all good. So good to see you.
And
And
same here. Thank you for having me.
so should we take a 5 minutes break, Meenu, for
Yeah,
the
yeah,
candidates?
Yeah,
Because
definitely.
the session was at 3:15. So
Hans.
we'll start sharp at 3:15 then.
Three.
Okay.
Yeah,
I think
sure.
my camera,
Yeah,
everything is working, so no issues with checking. Yeah.
right. Totally.
Okay. Yeah, Meenu,
Yes,
should
ma'am.
we start?
Yeah, we can start. So, our next speaker, Dr. Nisar Khan sir, is here. He is a professor at Faculty of Architecture and Acoustics, Jamia Millia Islamia, New Delhi. Dr. Nisar Khan, he has more than 16 years of experience in teaching He initiated the MR Urban Regeneration Program at Jamia Millia. His research works are published and presented in various national and international journals and conferences. He has delivered invited lectures at reputed institutions, including INTAC, SPA Delhi, SPA Bhopal, CPWD, National Museum Institute, Council of Architecture, NYASA, etc. He is also a fellow of the Indian Institute of Architects. Dr. Khan is a recipient of Dutch Orange Knowledge Program Fellowship twice in 2019 and 2022. He would be taking a session on the topic Historic Trade Routes as Cultural Corridor. Welcome, sir. You can start the session.
Thank you very much. I'm just trying to share the presentation, so just give me a second. Please let me know when it starts showing on the screen.
Yes, sir. Your screen is visible to us now.
All right, and so I'll just try to make it full screen as well, and just let me know the moment it starts appearing. So I hope it's visible now again, full screen.
Sir, it's not full screen, but we can see it in slide format.
All right, let it be. I think it's visible. All right. I'll not want to mess with this because it starts giving a lot of trouble. So if it's visible, I think we can start.
Yes, sir, it's visible.
Thank you very much for having me in this FDP. And the talk I'm going to deliver is on historic trade routes as cultural corridors. So I'll try to set a context of how the trade routes emerged. So we know that human beings have been migrating ever since shall I say we arrived on the planet. So in this particular map we can see that from about 100,000 years ago, when humans or Homo sapiens are supposed to have arrived in Africa, we have been moving throughout various continents. And as and when we reach which part is shown in this map, the idea is that humans have been migrating from one place to another. And this is something which is an evolutionary thing for human beings. Initially, when we were the hunter-gatherers, so we were kind of moving because we had to search for the food. So we were continuously moving from one place to another. We were hunting, we were gathering food. And as and when there was a shortage of food or the availability of food was going down at one place, we used to migrate. And that was, now this is something which is happening even now. So we know that there are many nomadic communities across the world. In India, we have Gujjar communities who keep migrating because of the seasonal changes and because of the way this thing has imbibed in their lifestyle and their culture. So this continuous movement and migration is something which is very much part of our evolution. And we have been doing this since we were hunter-gatherers, and even after we became, we settled down at places. So once humans started doing agriculture, and which resulted in the formation of villages, and which resulted in us settling down at one place. We even then that basic character of moving from one place to another, it resumed, but it resumed in the form of exchange of goods largely. So people were moving from one village to another, they were selling or they were exchanging their goods, and the initial creation of economy happened like that. So this something that was happening initially in the form of migration was kind of, it evolved later on as economy and trade, and that's how with the advent of economy, the formation of towns and cities also happened. This can also be understood in the emergence of various civilizations, the early civilizations like Mesopotamia, Indus, and Nile civilizations. Even in the American region, the Inca and Mayas and those were. So somehow it's like that these civilizations, they are a result of when people started settling down, and then again when they started exchanging ideas, exchanging goods, that agriculture and other things started spreading out. So in the map at the bottom, you can see the location of early civilizations. And in the map on the top, we can also see how these civilizations resulted in the spread of agriculture across the world. So this is how largely the migration of the human beings from one place to another resulted in the creation of trade routes. Because once initially they were migrating for the reason of finding food or because of the climatic conditions, at some point of time they started using the same routes for exchanging goods, for conducting trade, and that's how the trade routes started to emerge. With respect to the commodity that was exchanged in these trade routes, these trade routes started to be known by those commodities. So they were started to be known by those names. So we know that in India, it was cotton or precious stones or sugar or pepper. Those things were kind of exported from India, and from China, silks, perfumes, porcelain, ginger. Those things were kind of coming, and what was being sold or sent to other parts of the world is also seen in this map. Uh, in India, if we look at, then we can find that silk route, cotton route, and spice route were the prominent trade routes that were there, that were present. So in this map, we can see that the dark red color shows the Silk Road route. So all this is Silk Road, and it used to flow through the country of India as well, and especially in the area of Ladakh, and then coming down to the main Indian trade routes, which were called as Uttarapath and Dakshinapath. So this particular alignment was known as Uttarapath, which was traversing through the geography of India from northwest to east, and then there was another one which was connecting this trade route to the southern part of the country, which was known as Dakshinapath. So these trade routes started, they were kind of used to carry out trade activities. In this map, we can see, interestingly, the presence or location of rock paintings or petroglyphs. So you can see that how widely they are distributed, and as we know that rock paintings are the earliest form of artwork, and their distribution and the similarities in the rock paintings indicate that the cultural exchanges between various civilizations or various settlements were also happening even at that time, even during the early period. So these are some of the examples of the petroglyphs. Here we can see that the petroglyphs which are located in the Bhimbetka. So the one on the top left is in Bhimbetka, and this one is Mongolia, and this one is in Utah. So these are the three very different part of the world, and we can see that there are similarities in the depiction. There are also similarities in the way these paintings are being made. So if we look at this particular figurine here in Mongolia, where somebody is riding a horseback, we can find that this is strikingly similar with these ones here in Bhimbetka, near Bhopal in India, in the central part of the country. So we can see here there's similarities. So one thing is the presence of the petroglyphs, which is spread across the world, across the continents, and the other thing is the similarities that are found in them. So that indicates that the exchanges were prominently present even during the early times. So that is also there. Another very interesting thing that we found here is the similarities in these two sculptures, which are located, continents apart. So the one on the right is in India. The one in the left is found in Maya civilization, and both of them are belong to around the same time, so 500 to 600 AD or so. The word Maya also draws parallels with Maya Sura in Hindu mythology. So we know that the word Maya is a very common Indian name, and there is a character or an entity in Hindu mythology which is called as Maya Sura. So scholars do believe that the Mayan civilization has some connection with the Indian mythological character of Maya Sura. And then comes this similarity in these two sculptures, which we can see. So it's not just the similarity in the form of this sculpture, but also the presence of these smaller figurines at the bottom, and the way the other ornamentations and other things are done. This also indicates that there were very strong cultural exchanges that were happening between not just outside the world and outside the in country to India. So they were not mostly inwards; they were also outwards. So in both directions, these kind of exchanges were happening. We know that a lot of things that we eat these days, a lot of things on our cuisine are also a result of these cultural exchanges. So we know that biryani came from somewhere from Middle East, somewhere from Persian region, where it was known from the word biryan or so, and then pulao is also a term which comes from that part only, where it is known as pilaf or something like that. Samosa, we ended up knowing that it was called sanbusak in Isfahan, and it also emerged somewhere from there. So these kind of exchanges were continuously happening, and these trade routes which were there and which were playing a major role in the exchanges of these cultural items. When we look at the maritime trade routes, so India, because of its vast coastline and the presence of many port towns and cities, has have been in trade relations with many civilizations. Recently, in Muziris in Kerala, coins belonging to the Roman Empire are found in archaeological excavations, which indicate that there were cultural and trade connections between south of India during the Roman period with the Romans, or with Greeks and Romans and all that. So in this particular map, we can see how these maritime routes. So apart from Silk Route and apart from the land routes, land trade routes that we were having, we were also having these vast and very active maritime routes, which were connecting south of India to largely the Southeast Asian region. So the region of Malaya, Sumatra, Java, Vietnam, and all those were very actively connected. So in this map, again, you can see how the Chola Empire was, was in cultural exchange with Southeast Asia, and the Chola influence can also be seen. Now, there are many examples which can be seen, the tangible examples that can be seen as a product of these exchanges. The one example that I would like to quote over here is the presence of Ramayana. So Ramayana is not celebrated only in India. We are already aware that it is also celebrated in many other countries like Indonesia, where the Ramayana of Bali is very famous. Then we know that it is also celebrated, or it's also carried out in Cambodia, Vietnam, Thailand, Laos, Malaysia, Myanmar, in so many other countries. And the Ramayana there largely it has the same concept, but all these Ramayanas have different form of art. They have different style of narration. They have different kind of dresses and different kind of representation. But still, I think there should not be any doubt that largely Ramayana is one of the cultural exports that India had through their maritime routes. So this is something. Another example that I would like to quote over here is the example of Angkor Wat. Angkor Wat is a temple in Cambodia, and it's like it's one of the temples built in 12th century. But there is a temple in India which is located in Himachal and which has striking similarities in terms of form of the temples. So, if we try to understand this rock cut temple of Masroor, which is located in Himachal, India, is more or less an anomaly in temple architecture in the country, because rock cut temples are not very prevalent in the northern part of the country, especially in the hilly region. So there we have that pagoda style of temple, and which is largely built using the stone and timber masonry. But this is an anomaly, and it is believed that it was built around 8th century or so. Now, the site placement, the form of the temple, the presence of multiple shikharas in the temple, as we can see in these two side-by-side pictures, the presence of water tank in front of the temple is something which brings too many similarities, and then it can be obviously assumed that there was some kind of cultural exchange that was happening between, as far as the northern part of the country, with as far as Angkor Wat. This is not just in the plan form that this similarity exists. This also exists in the in other aspects as well. So you can see that in the plan forms. So on the left, we can see that this is the Angkor Wat temple, the plan of the Angkor Wat temple, and on the right we can see that the Sri Rangam temple and the complex. We can see how the plan form is more or less similar, and at the bottom you can see the plan form of the temple in Masroor. So these similarities are not only the form but also in the plan and also in the sculptures. So if you look at this this kind of carving on the wall or the sculptural things in Angkor Wat, and this, by the way, represents the churning of the ocean for the Amrit and all that Manthan, as we know of. So this is something that is representing that. And if you look carefully, look at the facial features over here, we can see those features which are strikingly similar in the case of Masroor as well. So the temple of Masroor in the Himachal, in the north of India, also share the similar facial features as well. So there is also the similarities that we find in the facial features of these sculptures between Masroor and Angkor Wat. Now, in this second part of the of this talk, I would like to discuss about these trade routes as cultural corridors. So we can understand how these trade routes, be the land trade routes or the maritime trade routes, how they actually played a role of a conduit. So they were acting as conduits where exchanges of not just trade and goods were happening, exchange of cultural elements like arts and cuisine and other things was also happening. So it was like they were like the conduits, which were the highways where these exchanges were taking place. And what we see in this map is GT Road, the Grand Trunk Road, which largely is the medieval version of the Uttarapath. So the Uttarapath, which was present during Ashokan period or Mauryan period, or maybe even before that, was largely revived as Grand Trunk Road during the Sher Shah's period. It is attributed to Sher Shah Suri, and it was known as Shahi Sadak during that time. So in this case, we can see this Grand Trunk Road was also acting as a cultural corridor. And then we can see that a lot of infrastructure and built heritage elements like, Ashokan edicts, like sarais, minars, gardens, shikargah, and bridges, etc., are located along these highways or these trade routes. So in this map, we can find the presence of Ashokan edicts across the country. We can see that a lot of them are located along the Uttarapath or the GT road, because the alignments are largely the same. And they were located at important junctions or at important locations on these trade routes, sometimes along or closer to a settlement or in a settlement, and sometimes otherwise at a junction. So one of the Ashokan edict, which is located in South Delhi, close to where my Jamia campus is located, is next to the Lotus Temple. And we know that this route, which was going next to Kalkaji Temple and going all the way to the west through crossing the Aravalis, was a historic trade route. And so one of the things is that, these Ashokan edicts are located and found at important locations in trade routes. They marked the presence of the trade route. They informed the rule of law to the users of the trade routes. So, these were one of the earliest examples of the highway infrastructure in the country. During the medieval times, a lot of other elements, as I mentioned, sarais, minars, gardens, shikargahs, and bridges, etc., were added to this. So these are some of the minars that we know of, which are located along the GT road, mostly along the GT road. So the minar, the first image that we see is the minar of Jam in Afghanistan, I guess. And then we know the Qutub Minar. So they were all located along the same GT road. And the Minar at Jam and Minar at Delhi, Qutub Minar, are almost of the same time. They are built around the same time. And we can see that there are similarities in their form and so. The third one is the Minar in Bayana. Fourth one is the Minar in, which is also known as Hiran Minar in Fatehpur Sikri. And the fifth one is the Firoz Shah's Minar in Malda. So this is something, which we find as one of the examples of infrastructure. Now, similar to Ashokan edicts or Ashokan pillars, these minars also marked the location or the alignment of the trade routes. They were like, a representation that you are actually using the imperial trade route. And then there are certain rules and regulations that one needs to follow. So these trade routes were under the control of the emperor or the sultan of that time. And then they were also provided security for that reason, and taxes were also collected for using the trade routes. So these are one of these are the example of markers that were provided. Now these are the monumental markers for the trade routes. We also have a smaller version of these towers. So we had coast minars. Now these are the stunted or smaller version of the markers which were located along the entire GT road. They were initially built by Akbar, and then they were regulated by Jahangir and all. They have minor variations in their height and plan forms and forms, etc. But then they were also marking the alignment of the trade route, and they were also indicating that the security and the taxation of this trade route belongs to the emperor or the sultan of that period. We know about sarais. So across the India, especially North India, we see too many sarais present along the trade route. And I'll call you. So, there are these many sarais. So if you look at the sarai top left, it is Sarai Noor Mahal, somewhere in Punjab. On the right here, right top, we have Sarai in Fatehpur Sikri. And then this image at the bottom is one of the sarais and post minars present located together somewhere again in the rural Punjab. So sarais were also very important infrastructure of these highways of medieval times, the trade routes of medieval times. And sarais were those spaces where cultural exchanges used to happen. So it's not just the trade and commerce. So sarais normally are understood to be an example of inns or motels of that period where people used to stay overnight. But apart from that function where they used to provide accommodation to the travelers during the medieval times, they also provided an opportunity to exchange their goods. So sometimes, or rather, should I say, many a times, goods were exchanged. The merchandise used to be exchanged between the travelers. In the sarais, apart from that, sarais were also the places where the melting pot of culture was happening. So, it's like that the cuisines were kind of prepared and then they were kind of offered to the travelers. Now that is where the exchange of biryani or samosa or pulao or other things happened. The languages. So sarais were the places where new languages emerged. So we know that the language Urdu is an amalgamation of Arabic, Hindi, and Persian language. So there are these three languages, which when they got hybridized in these sarais on these trade routes, they gave rise to the language Urdu. So Urdu literally means camp. So it's not the name of the language. The language is called Rekta. The word Urdu literally translates to camp, which means that when you camp during, when you are actually traveling, and when you camp, so you may camp in a sarai or you may camp otherwise. So it was the language spoken in the camp. Now, why will you speak a language, a distinct language in a camp? Because that is where you find people belonging to Persia, that is where you find people belonging to Arabia, Central Asia, and India coming together, and then they exchanged words, they exchanged grammar, they exchanged the articulation of the language, they exchanged the poetry, and that's how a new language, entirely new language called Urdu emerged. So this is something which is another example of what sarais, were capable of. And many other things were exchanging here. So sarais are one of the very important, they were the nodes where the cultural exchanges were happening. Another very important example of the highway infrastructure of that time were the bridges. So there are numerous bridges spread across the country. So the bridge that we are looking to our left, on the left of the slide, is the Shahi Pul in Jaunpur, built during the Akbar's period. And then we have another bridge on the right, and there are many bridges. So bridges are also important endeavors or very important examples of highway infrastructure that were present along the trade routes. And in the present time, if we talk about these bridges, many of these bridges are heritage, and many of these bridges are an example of architecture and engineering of that time. These trade routes were also, places where historical events happen. So a lot of history that we read, or a lot of history that we understand today, was happening on these trade routes or along these trade routes. The image on the left that you see is the image of the GT road during the partition of India in 1947, where a lot of people actually traveled to Pakistan and vice versa. And this was a tragic event that we know, and a lot of people even lost their lives and otherwise. So these historical trade routes, they have witness of many historical events as well. Many battles, many important and decisive battles in the history, like Battle of Panipat or Battle of Khanwa, it happened, along these trade routes. And these trade routes, for that reason, are also an example of those spaces where, which have to be acknowledged and connected with these events as well. So they are also example of intangible heritage in that sense. Now, in the final part of this talk, I will quickly want to delve into the present situation of these trade routes. So what are the present situations of these trade routes? And I'll start with the Yamuna Expressway, as we call it, which connects Delhi with Agra. So it is one of the very good expressways, and it's very fast, it's very convenient, and it's also one of the earliest expressways that was constructed in the northern India. Now, if we look at this, although it provided a very good connectivity between Delhi and Agra, there are other issues which emerged with this, and the issues were that the traditional route or the historic trade route, which used to go from Delhi to Agra, used to connect the historic settlements of Vrindavan, Mathura, and then it used to go to Agra. And even before reaching the Taj Mahal, the tomb of Sikandra the tomb of Akbar, which is located in Sikandra, used to fall on this trade route. The fort of Agra was located on this trade route. Now, when you use the Yamuna Expressway, there is a very sanitized connection that is established to Taj Mahal. So everything is skipped. The historic settlement of Vrindavan, the sacred and religiously important settlement of Mathura is skipped. The Sikandra is skipped. The Agra fort is skipped, and you directly go to Taj Mahal via sanitized route, which takes you outwards. Now, what is happening is that the historic trade routes are losing their relevance because of such interventions. And what is happening is that the historic trade routes are realigned. So they are realigned, and or new expressways are created. Now, the reason why this is being done is to provide faster and safe connectivity between two places, and also to tackle with the traffic congestion. Those are the two reasons largely given. But the loss of historical trade routes is also there. So nowadays, the people who used to otherwise witness Mathura, Vrindavan on the way to Agra, or also used to encounter Sikandra, or may want to stop over at Sikandra and visit the tomb of Akbar, are no more doing that, and that is not happening. So one thing is the realignment of the historical trade routes. The other thing is that because of creation of new expressways, many of the destinations which used to be otherwise part of this of traveling on a historic trade routes are no more following on the routes. So they are being skipped. And then the other issue that I understand when it comes to identifying these trade routes as cultural corridors, because these trade routes, along with these all these infrastructure and all these built heritage and all these historical events, collectively become cultural corridors, because they are the conduits, they are the places, these are the spaces where these cultural exchanges were happening, and they are a representation of that cultural exchange that has been happening since ever. So the another issue that I can notice is the dilapidated situation of these built heritage along these trade routes. So we can see some of the examples of these medieval bridges belonging to the Sultanate period, Mughal period, which are in a dilapidated state, which are not maintained, and these easily qualify as the built heritage of these trade routes. The one on the right that you see is Barapula, which is within Delhi, which is inside the city of Delhi, and is largely was built during Akbar's time, and was the connection that used to take people from Delhi to Mathura. So this was the original alignment of Delhi-Mathura highway of that time. And you can see in this image the poor and dilapidated condition that it is facing now. This is not the main connection anymore, so this is encroached upon. A lot of garbage is thrown. The structural integrity of the bridge is also, compromised. We can see that a new road is constructed, or new bridge is constructed on the other side of this bridge, and nowadays there is a elevated road as well on this alignment. So this is another concern where we can see that all this heritage buildings or built heritage that can be easily identified as the highway infrastructure of that time is facing neglect. So these are the coast minars. This one is somewhere in Sonipat or so, and this is, as we can say, this is gradually being encroached upon. We can see the other category of coast minars, which are now, because of the realignment of the highway or the trade route, are now located in the interiors of the agricultural fields, and they are gradually being dismantled, or we are going to lose them. So this is another category of that. We are seeing that there are a lot of sarais which were present along these trade routes, which are kind of again encroached upon, and which are kind of we are going to lose them. So the image here is of the sarai in Badarpur, which is again located in the south of Delhi. And you can see, how the gateway, so we can see one gateway here and the other gateway on the other side. And sarais used to have these two gateways, which were, kind of how people used to travel. So when people used to travel, they used to cross the sarais and they used to stay inside. So they were like the form and the design of the sarais were something like that. So we can see here that the sarai is almost becoming, indistinguishable. It's not, it's only the presence of these gateways that one can identify that it's a sarai. It's been encroached upon, the form is changed and all that. So this loss of heritage, which is why these trade routes can be called as cultural corridors, is also something which is a major concern. Another sarai Azimganj, which is located in next to Sundar Nursery and within the boundaries of Delhi Zoo, is recently been restored. So it was also in a very poor situation. But this is an example where sarai was recognized as a heritage building and it was restored. So here, what I can show you is the example of how GT Road as a trade route or as a heritage trade route is kind of seen in Pakistan. So in this image that we see in our left, the original alignment or the original form of the GT Road is seen, where the bricks were used to pave it and its original construction, and they have identified it, they have found it. A lot of these alignments are still present in India, especially in Punjab, but because of the realignment of the highways, they are gradually lost or they are in a poor state, and we need to identify them. We need to kind of identify them as cultural corridors. Here on the right image, on the right, we can see that the original alignment and the original construction of the Grand Trunk Road, the GT Road, is kind of preserved again in the Pakistan. So in Pakistan, for a certain distance, the original alignment and original construction is kind of preserved as a heritage property. Another example that I would like to take here to build this case for for identification of the trade routes in India as cultural corridors and their preservation and their revival is the historic US trade route, US route of 66, right? So in US, this route 66 is considered as historical, it's considered as heritage, and it is something which is used by the travelers, or it is used by the tourists for that reason. So there they don't have monuments. So we have sarais, we have minarets, we have post minars, we have bridges. In US, they do not have that, because we know that US does not have the monuments of medieval times or historic times. What they have is only a highway which they preserve as Route 66. So they are not making or expanding this highway as a expressway, or widening it as a high expressway or something. They understand that this is something which has a certain historical value, and this should be retained as such in its original character, and this should be given to the people to celebrate, to enjoy, to understand, and for the future generations as well. Unfortunately, that approach is not yet adopted in our country, and we have enormous wealth of these trade routes. We have enormous wealth of history associated with these trade routes. We have huge repository of these heritage structures located along these trade routes, and we just need to look at them as cultural corridors, because collectively they are these places where cultural exchanges happen. And then we need to kind of revive them. We need to preserve them. That is what I think we should be doing. So thank you all for paying attention and listening to this, and that's all from my side.
Thank you so much, sir, for the wonderful presentation. So we have got some comments and questions in the chat. So I'll just read it out.
Yeah, please do that.
So
I hope
Mona ma'am,
it was usable for the participants. But
yes,
yeah,
yes, definitely. Mona ma'am has written, Qutub Minar, such detailed sculpture has no parallel in any other Islamic minar. It may not be of Islamic origin. So it's a comment.
I think that is something which is beyond the scope of this presentation. I would not like to indulge in that question.
Okay. Anupama Chawla, she has written, what was the function of the Kos Minar, keeping in mind with its bulky shape and height? Bulky shape and height.
See, coast minars were initially constructed by Akbar along the GT road, or along the trade routes. Now there were multiple functions of coast minar. One was obviously that it used to orient the traveler. Now we know that we are talking about a period when we did not have maps, we did not have signages, we did not have GPS or so. So people required some kind of markers to orient themselves or to find their way. So one thing was that they were kind of used as the markers. The other thing was that they used to also indicate that this trade route or the route that you are following is the imperial trade route. So it is under the control of the emperor or the sultan of that time. So the presence of Coast Minar indicated that you are under the control of the emperor. You are being provided with the security. So there used to be security guards present at the location of the Coast Minar. So every Coast Minar had one or two security guards on horseback present, always to deal with any incident of robbery or something like that if it happens along the trade route. Also, collection of taxation used to happen along the trade route. So a basic infrastructure was provided along at the location of the coast minar. So apart from marking the presence of the trade route and orienting the travelers, it was more of a symbolic as well. Now, if there are books, so if you read the book by Abul Khair Muhammad, he has written a very good book on Mughal trade routes. He mentions that the Qutub Minars used to play important role in conveying the messages during that time as well. So there used to be messengers located at every coast minar, and the distance between the coast minars was 2 coasts. So it was 2 miles, so around, let's say, around 3 kilometers or so. And this was regularized by Jahangir in his period. So during Akbar's period, coast minars were built or constructed, but they were not at a regular interval of distance. During Jahangir's period, they were made regular after every 2 coasts. So there used to be a horse rider. There was a rider on horseback at every coast minar. and he used to convey the message, or should I say, he used to relay the message from one coast minar to the next coast minar. And then at the next coast minar, there used to be another rider who used to take it to the next coast minar. Now, in that book, it has been mentioned that in order to convey a message from Delhi to Calcutta, it used to take only 18 hours using this method. So in order to run a government at that point of time across the geography of the country, India, vast geography of the country, India, without the availability of IT and telephone and electronic communication, coast minars, trade routes, and this highway infrastructure played very important role. And conveying a message which is about 1500 kilometers apart, Delhi and Calcutta, within 18 hours was a very effective and efficient thing to do at that point of time. So coast minars played multiple roles. It's not only, so they were the visual markers to orient the travelers, but apart from that, they had many more functions to play. A few of them are still present. They can be seen along the Delhi-Chandigarh route, Delhi-Ambala route. Some of them are present in Punjab. A few of them are present within Delhi as well. So one of them is located next to Apollo hospitals in Delhi. And one of them is located in Delhi Zoo. So there are few available in here, and a lot of them are lost in due course of time. So they are, I hope that's the answer to the question.
Pratap sir is asking, is there any example of documented sarai from the said road?
From?
Documented sarai.
From which?
There is any documented sarai from the same road, the said road.
Yeah. Most of the sarais are very documented. So the sarai present in Fatehpur Sikri is documented in various books. So there is a book by Professor Rezavi. It's a recent book. It was released around 7-8 years back. It is documented. There is a book by Lucy Peck on Agra and Fatehpur Sikri. It is documented there. Then there are books by Subhash Parihar on sarais and highway in Punjab especially. There is especially a book called titled Caravan Sarais by Professor Mansoora Haider. So these are the few of the books that I can readily remember. But apart from that, sarais are very well documented in various write-ups as well, various research papers as well.
Yeah, so those anyone else would like to ask any question, please comment on the chat, or you're also welcome to unmute yourself and ask.
So if there are no more questions,
this link
it's
is
fine.
shared by somebody. What link is this? I think Mona Chandra has shared a link. It's a Google Map link. Okay, maybe it is related to the sarais. Yeah. Fine, I think we're done with the questions. Dr. Pallavi, please put the question. Yeah, I think she has done the quiz.
Yeah, so quiz 2, day 3 quiz 2 is shared in the chat box.
Sure, we can end the session there.
Yeah, yes. Thank you so much for the session, sir. It was very interesting.
Yeah,
thank you for
very
having me.
interesting session, Dr. Nisar.
I just hope that this was usable, and
Yes.
Thank you for organizing this very interesting FDP. It is a very relevant and interesting thing.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Pleasure.
So participants, the link will remain active till 4:30. So you have to attempt the quiz before that. After that, the link will also go.